It's time, and you've tuned into the Franklin County Varsity Sports Report. Now here's your host, Bobby C.
Hello, and welcome to the Franklin County Varsity Sports Report. I'm Bobby C. I want to welcome you here today. Boy, we've had a great summer, and boy, I got to tell you that the weather has just been very sticky around here over the last couple of weeks. And, you know, with the rain that we've had and the humidity, it's just been a real sticky last couple of weeks here in New England. And, of course, during the month of July, we all know about the weather we were having with almost temperatures at 100 degrees. And, you know, when it comes to warmth and it comes to workouts and how to be able to condition yourself, it's about officials. And what I mean by that are the guys that are what we call the referees, the ones who are dressed up in the black and white, and they run the court. We're going to talk with two officials here today, and we're going to talk about their board. We'll talk about sportsmanship and much more. Our show brought to you by the Four Leaf Clover Restaurant in Burniston, also by Albert Hearing Services, 33 Riddell Street in Greenfield, also by our friends at Hubie's Tavern and Restaurant, Avenue Way in Turners Falls, and Denny's Pantry on Burniston Road in Greenfield. I'm your host, Bobby C., welcoming you here today, and we welcome two gentlemen right here. We want to welcome Mike Churchill and Nate Burdick. How you doing, guys?
Great. Good. How are you, Bobby? Thanks for having us on here, Bobby.
Hey, you know, guys, I got to tell you, when we're really thinking about what is happening in the world of sports locally and nationally, there is such a difference in what community you're in and what state you're in on what is going on in different sports. But one thing we do know about our area is basketball is still pretty popular around here. And you guys are definitely running the courts, and you're definitely seeing that there are kids out there to be able to fill those benches. But the big question is, that I've been wondering for the last 5 or 6 years is how much change has made with kids as far as commitment is concerned? Who wants to start?
Go ahead, Nate.
Sure, I'll start.
Go ahead.
You know, there's so many options for kids nowadays. In addition to youth sports, there's also in-house activities. There's the internet's a challenge, Fortnite, video games and whatnot. And kids growing up today just have more options than we did as kids 20, 30 years ago, where our parents would just kick us out of the house and say, come back when the street lights are on, and we'd make our own games. And the fact that these young people have so many more options now tends to dilute a number of different activities, including sports.
You know, one of the other things I've noticed in church, you can back me up on this one, is I think that with AAU and all these other travel teams, I think a lot of these kids are really taking a commitment to taking on just one sport, or maybe at the most 2, not 3 like the old days.
Yeah, I mean, when we were kids, it was you play your baseball in the summertime and you play basketball in the winter, or wherever you could find a court in the summer. And now you're getting a lot of kids who just play one sport. They're doing travel teams where they're playing in tournaments every weekend, and we see a lot of it in basketball, where you can see how the kids have improved year over year because they're only playing basketball, and they're playing travel basketball and fall leagues and spring leagues. And we start to see all of this going on, and a lot of the other sports get diluted because you just don't have enough numbers at all the schools of students to cover all these games. So when we see the kids out there really working hard as officials, we're always trying to do our best because we know that they're really committing to this, and hopefully there's enough kids out there who are willing to put down the Xbox controller for a while and pick up a ball and play any sport, so we can hopefully have these kids out running around and staying active.
You know, activity is so important, especially when you're a youth. You know, one of the big talks that a lot of people have been talking about is that it's not healthy for your body sometimes to only do one sport. It's better to try to be able to do 2 or 3 sports because you use different muscles for different sports that you play. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think the perfect example in today's day and age is a number of young baseball players that are having Tommy John surgery at the age of 21, 22, 23, and 24, and they've become so sport-specific with regards to baseball early on at the age of 10, 11, 12 years old. And when they don't learn how to throw a football, when they don't learn how to catch and pass a basketball, when they don't learn how to build the muscles around, it creates such an amount of strain on the specific muscles that to the point where it's almost a badge of honor for these kids now to get their Tommy John surgery earlier in their career and get it over with. But it's just yet another function of not being such a well-rounded individual. And unfortunately, there was a blueprint that came out about 25 years ago when Tiger Woods came on the scene, with his regimen that his father put him through. And it seems as though that's the path that a lot of parents take their kids on in whatever sport it is, and they're willing to sacrifice all the other well-rounded facets of the potential opportunities out there in order to give their kids the one chance in the one sport that they truly have a passion for.
And it's a great point, Nate. And I got to say, the one thing that I've noticed is that these athletes who really do commit to that one sport, a lot of them are very dominant at that one sport if they really make that commitment and they're athletic kids. I mean, I look and I see I'm going to give a great example of a kid who I think is a perfect example of a guy who plays two sports, but is able to use two parts of his body to be able to help him. And that's John Morrison from Hopkins Academy. Johnny is a pitcher and a phenomenal pitcher, all right? But he gets down low and bangs bodies during the basketball season. So he's running up and down a court, and he's getting that kind of workout as he's, rebounding and doing all the things that he does on the basketball court. But when he's on a baseball mound, now he's using his brain. He's got to be able to place the ball. He's got to use his strength in his upper body, use his legs, which he's been using all winter to be able to keep the strength in his legs. He's a kind of example of a kid who is utilizing two sports to really make his health better and giving John an extra opportunity to maybe have a chance someday to maybe get a major league contract.
Yeah, I mean, we see some of the sports where we see the athletes come in during basketball season. You can see the ones that are a little quicker up and down the court, the ones who seem to adjust to plays that they catch on the fly. A lot of them are soccer players or field hockey players, where they're used to having to make quick turns and quick adjustments. And those kids, they generally get through the conditioning a little quicker. They're in a little better shape when the season starts. And then we see them out on the courts and we see them running around, and they tend not to get as injured. So it's certainly something where we want to see kids out there playing in every sport and working their bodies and not getting those injuries, because nothing's worse than seeing a kid go down in a game.
And Johnny's a great example. In 2018, he is the exception to the norm.
He really is.
30 years ago, there were 25 or 30 kids like that we could name off the top of our heads, and it just doesn't happen anymore.
I totally can, Nate. Honestly, I could probably name more than 30. Yeah. That's the funny thing, guys. And he is an exception. And that's why I used him as an example, because I, being the sports guy I am and catching so many games and doing the games during the basketball season, and you watch it during baseball and you see the way he performs. He is one of those kids who's pretty special, but he's also utilized all the good muscles in his body and kept himself in good shape to be able to be in a position where he's now a Division I pitcher for college. I mean, this is a great opportunity for a young kid here in our region.
Yeah, and there's plenty of sports out there that are looking for people to play. We see it every day. We see the empty spots on the bench, and we see teams struggling to field a JV team. I know I can take my daughter's team as a personal example. They didn't have enough kids for a JV team last year. So you have freshmen playing on a varsity team where they're not getting a lot of playing time on the court, but they're going through the practice and they're working towards that. If they could just get a few more kids out on the court, then they'd be able to have that second team, and you start to get the kids involved more.
Another thing I've noticed is a lot of these kids that are starting in 8th grade, I don't always think it's always the best sometimes. And I'm going to give an example of somebody who definitely utilized her body a little extra, and you both know her very well, is Jenna Patala. Jenna Patala started as an 8th grader on a basketball program that the year before she came on was 0-20. Okay, that girls' basketball program at the time at Turner's was 0-20. So they get this 8th grade girl who's got a lot of athletic ability. Her father at the time was the head coach, and he's also an official with you guys. And I say this because I think that she had to utilize her body a lot. I think she worked a lot harder and put a lot more effort than a normal 8th grader would into her game. And it ended up having injuries happen to her in her career at the end of her softball career. And I feel bad for her because I think she could have been an amazing, amazing athlete out of Turner's. I don't know what you guys think, but that's what I feel about Jenna.
Sure, and it's a risk-reward situation in terms of how much you want to put into it. And there are so many other factors that variables that factor into, an individual athlete's injury. Genetics plays a part, stress, frequency. I mean, there's just freak accidents that happen. And to be able to pinpoint it would be over my head,
right?
Certainly,
exactly.
But that was unfortunate for Jenna, but she's making the best of it. And
she is, and she's been able to take all of her knowledge, and she's been able to coach these tournament teams, and she's doing very well with that. And these young kids really respect her a lot. So she is one of those girls who I think, it was a little tough for her. She started at a very young age, at 8th grade, and I think the hardest thing for a coach is when you have someone that starts in 8th grade, and then by the time they're a junior or senior, they didn't really gain much. That's got to be one of the most frustrating things for a coach. Only because it's not about you being selfish as a coach. It's about, why didn't they get better? What was the reason? Were they not being able to play with the friends that they grew up with and they were at the court all the time with? Was it the different change of scenery for them, being that they were the young kid and they weren't the part of the big fish in the small pond because they were the best with their group? That could be part of the head game, could be just as important as physical.
And having that skill set is one important factor, but also there's a huge difference between your average 8th grader and 11th grader. The bodies are growing at that time, and you muscular issues that come up where you just can't compete at that speed, so you push yourself a little harder, push yourself a little stronger, maybe lift a little more weight than you would normally do, try to shave an extra 10 seconds off your mile time, and before you know it, you've got a knee injury or a back injury, and you just can't compete at that level again. So the more kids that we can get involved in sports, the more teams we can get involved, the easier it's going to be on these kids to be able to grow and progress through the levels. That's why we don't have little leaguers pitching in the Game 7 of the World Series. They're just not ready for it.
Absolutely.
And they need to have that time to grow and develop.
And there's another component, and this is strictly an opinion too, is that with our young people today, they are growing up in terms of the me first generation. And a lot of these kids do aspire to be the best, there's nothing wrong with that. The unfortunate part that I see as a school teacher and someone who's around athletics is that some student athletes, when they realize and recognize that they're not going to be the number one person, they just quit altogether. And there's a lesson lost among that. And the lesson is what can I do to make the team better? What is my role? How can I help the team while not being the best player on the team? And unfortunately, there's a lot of student athletes that take the path of least resistance and don't want to put in the work if they're not going to get all the glory on the front page of the newspaper, and they just say, I'm going to quit and go do something else. And the life lessons that are lost is unfortunate, because sports is supposed to teach us bigger things in terms of how to be a good team player. How can I help my team when it comes time to leave athletics and go into the work world? And these are lessons that the kids are losing by not playing in team sports nowadays.
It's funny that you said that, because it's so true. And you look at teams who have really surprised people, and I'm going to give you a team that surprised everybody this past basketball season, the Pioneer Panthers. I mean, what they did and the run that they had was just absolutely amazing. And it was a bunch of guys who all bought in, played as a team. Different person would step it up every night. Success. Yeah. Scotty Thayer probably had the easiest year of his coaching career because of the great kids that he had at Pioneer. That's just how I feel. I did a lot of their games, and I watched the way it went. And Scotty looked relaxed. Scotty looked relaxed this year because he had a group of people who were willing to be team players, not I players. And if you can have a bunch of team players come out and play their hearts out every night, you will have success. And Pioneer was a perfect example of that this past basketball season.
Absolutely. I mean, they had some kids who put up a lot of points, but then you also have the other kids, as Nate was saying, they bought in. You said this as well. They bought in. They realized they each had a role. They're not all going to score 1,000 points, but there's not one single 1,000-point scorer out there. And Angelo Thomas, the coach up at Hopkins, would admit this. He put up a dazzling amount of points when he played, but I'm sure that every player on that team had a role in scoring those points, whether it was passing the ball or setting a screen, whatever it comes down to. Everybody has that part to play, and for these kids to have that one star, you really have to have a team full of stars that are all buying into the system. And I saw the Pioneer team a couple of times. I saw them down at the cage, and every one of those kids was playing for one goal, and that was a team goal. And that's
darn right.
That's where you want to be.
It's really true.
And for a varsity basketball coach in Franklin County to get a group of kids to buy into that concept is like pulling a rabbit out of the hat. And kudos to Scotty Thayer for the job he did last year. And
amazing job.
It was great to watch from a distance.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. And
it's funny because me and Jeff and Chris Collins, we talked about that at the end of the season, that Scotty Thayer had a special group of kids. He really, really did. And I take my cap off to every single one of those players on that Pioneer team and their coach for the hard work and the effort they put in, and the great support system of the school and the parents who came out and supported that team throughout the year. You know, we can go on the other side, guys. That girls program at Greenfield High School, you got a guy who can just get it done with John Hickey. He doesn't sugarcoat nothing. I mean, he's straight up, tells you how it is. But I'll tell you what, those girls, they play as a team. Whether it's going to be Lizzie Holland having a day, or Sam Smith having a day, or Reagan Hickey having a day, or Katie Hazelton having a day. It doesn't matter. There's always someone that was willing to step it up at a different time for that Greenfield team. They're pretty special as well.
They are, and to really see what's happening with the Greenfield girls basketball program in 2018, you kind of have to go back 6 years or so when John took over, and admittedly he said he had a vested interest in the program with his youngest daughter, Reagan, and both John Hickey, Roy Emerson, and Dave Kennedy actually took it upon themselves 6 years ago to restart the youth program in the summer and get these kids into playing in summer leagues. And Dave Kennedy spent a lot of time coaching them in the summer, and they drove these kids to tournaments to eastern Massachusetts and New Hampshire and Rhode Island, Connecticut. And quite honestly, they kind of got their butts kicked when they were younger. They did. And John and Roy Emerson and Dave, they knew that the long-term benefits of it were going to outweigh the short-term long rides home after getting beat by 40 points. And here you are, fast forward 6 years later, to a team that made it to the cage in the Western Mass Finals, and they're going to be returning a number of players again this year. But it's just making a commitment, and those three individuals made the commitment 6 years ago, and they had a plan, and finally you get to see the fruition of it.
Oh, and it's fun. And you know, it's funny because if you look back at the whole show and you say to yourself, well, those girls that play basketball, they're the same ones who are the great athletes playing softball for for Lovett now, for Ryan.
And field hockey.
Then you say to yourself, wow, Erin Thayer, which is Scotty Thayer's wife, she is the head field hockey coach, and they go to championships too. So these girls, the reason why they are champions is from the work ethic that they've put in. You become a champion by being a team, and it's not an I program. You can't win championships in every sport or be in a championship final if you're not working together. You can't do it for three different sports because there's no way the I game will work in that particular program, and that's why Greenfield girls are so much fun to watch.
And you've got them out there, as we said right back at the beginning, they're playing multiple sports. They're not wearing their bodies out by playing one sport and just working that muscle group. And they work together on all these different sports that all have somewhat different skill sets. After a few years, they know what they're thinking without even having to communicate on the court. And that's where you want to see athletes working together with a common goal. Now these kids have done this for so long. I imagine that when school is done and sports are done and they've moved on their own ways in life, I'm sure these kids will still be calling each other at 9:30 in the evening saying, boy, my daughter's done this, my son's done this, and it's a connection that you keep for a lifetime.
I agree.
And then the other thing it does, it creates culture. And it creates a culture, and winning breeds winning, and togetherness breeds togetherness.
let's go right into another guy who's done that forever. I call him Coach Mullins, but I call Sortino Field Mullins Center too, because that is the Mullins Center during the spring, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The guys there. Gary Mullins, how do you take a program and as you noticed, I said the word program. I didn't even say team, did I? I said program.
There's a difference.
How do you take a program and be able to, year after year, reload, success, success, success? That's got to come with some kind of work. And you know what that work is? It's the 8 coaches that he has helping him and the commitment of the 15 players that are on his softball team, all buying in together. It's a 23-person program plus parents, fans. Otherwise, there's no way. Let's talk about Gary Mullins for a minute, guys. The guy's an incredible machine when it comes to being able to bring out the best in that small town of Turners Falls.
And again, it's you said program, not team. These kids are playing in the summer. We see them when I'm umpiring softball. I see them at Murphy Park when they're 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and they're playing middle school. They're playing JV. They're playing in some of these travel teams, and they're developing that skill set. And every one of those kids knows what the culture is, and they want to be a part of it. And it's sense of involvement, and then they just give the effort, they work hard, and success breeds success.
And let's talk about this. You got Taryn Thayer and Juliana Rode, 2 younger players, okay? They played JV, came up, and they played in the varsity role this year. Matter of fact, Juliana Rode came up big in the state semifinal game where she came up with a big base hit that gave that security run for them that they needed to go to the finals, okay, against Abington, which was a darn good team, by the way. They faced a really good team. But my point is he even gave 2 girls who were playing JV and varsity split time a chance to play in a big moment and give them playing time in the playoffs. Taryn and Juliana got a lot of playing time during playoff time, and they were girls that played both. That shows to me that a coach has confidence in his younger players. Jade Tyler, guys, you ever seen her upper body? She's a swimmer. She is a very strong swimmer. She swims the butterfly. She does the breaststroke. She is jacked, okay? She is an amazing pitcher. She's the new reload right now. You know, Peyton Emery is done. She's going to graduate. She's all done. Now the new pitcher is now Jade Tyler.
And that's the difference between a team and a program.
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
It's so true.
Success breeds success. But the other thing that I admire and respect about Gary is that, you know, young people, whether they're middle school students or high school students, they won't admit this, but they want to be held accountable. And Gary holds his players accountable, not just his softball players, but his basketball players as well.
He does. And he really does.
But we, outside of sports, more often than not, we have a culture where adults choose not to hold young people accountable. And in the absence of that, it just doesn't matter, and everything kind of filters away. But the reality is that young people do want to be held accountable, and if they know they're going to be held accountable, they tend to pull up their socks a little bit higher, lace up their cleats a little bit tighter, bring their lunchbox, and go to work.
That's a good point. Really good point, Nate. You know, I think about Turners, and I was thinking about the athletes and how they are the same way as Greenfield. You think of Jade Tyler and you think of Olivia Whittier as 2 really good swimmers from their swim team that are working their muscles getting ready for spring. You look at Cassidy Wozniak. She skates with the boys on the Greenfield hockey team. She is really good, guys. This girl's legit. She's played on some big time stages as in girls hockey, okay? And she plays with the boys. And they check in everything, guys. She ain't afraid of nothing, all right? Then you look at the Murphy girls. Taylor Murphy, that girl is unbelievable. You got to see her on a volleyball court, guys. We don't get to see her because she's doing volleyball when we're busy, doing other stuff, But she's amazing. These kids are really conditioned very well. They really, really are. So when you hear about Turners in Greenfield and their women and their athletics of the girl teams, those 2 teams have done really well with breeding really good female athletes. Can't take that away from Frontier either. Frontier always brings out good female athletes. And you know who's starting to bring out more athletes too? And we talked about this the other day. Even Mohawk girls are really starting to bring out some athletes. What about that girl Megan Davis in the running and going to the nationals for the 2 mile? I mean, that's a special moment for this young lady, you know? She's running up there in the big hills up there in good old, you know, she lives in Plainfield, you know? Oh, yeah. But she's working. And she's now on a national stage as one of the best 2 mile runners in the whole nation. Not Franklin County, not Western Mass, and not the state of Massachusetts, the country. That's pretty cool, man. And she's young. She's still got many years left ahead of her to run. So these are the kind of kids that are putting the effort in. Yep. And I really believe that the more effort that they put into their game and their craft, it's going to make it better for them. But the key is success. It's also, like you said, Nate, team playing and building a culture. I love that, building a culture. That's really it's a great line right there. Yep. Church, I want to bring up something. You and I, we're bigger fellas, but one thing I'm going to say about you, and I give credit where credit's due, man. You run up and down that court every single winter. And I'm going to tell you, man, I commend you for it, because I'm struggling with nerve damage myself, so there, you know, my mobility has gone way down because of the situation I'm in. You get out there, you know the game, you know the rules, you're good with the kids, you're good with the coaches, and you get out there and you do something special that a lot of us guys would take for granted. And I'm going to tell you, Church, I think you've done an amazing job with this board. I think that you're the spokesman for this board, that you care about the officials and you care about these kids. And let's talk about your board. I think people need to know what your board is about, what you guys' commitment is, what your goals are, and we'll talk about the special scholarship thing that you do every year for our special All-Star game. Now it's time to get right into what you guys are all about. Let's talk about the Board of Officials.
All right, well, thank you, Bobby. And you know, in the wintertime, it's great to get out there and see these kids year after year and see them grow up and grow through. But as officials, we want to be out there to make sure that the kids can have these games. And our board, the IAABO board, Board 28, which covers Hampshire and Franklin counties, what we do is we're a training organization. We train officials, we train people to become basketball officials. We go through a very comprehensive course with them that involves about 10 weeks. Our interpreter, Andy Rogers, does a fantastic job. He's assisted by our assistant interpreter, Jim Cleveland, and a couple of the other veterans on the board. And they do a good job teaching them the rules and how to position themselves. But really, we're looking for people who have been former players, have been former coaches, people who just like the game of basketball, or people who just, they want an activity to do in the wintertime. We're shut inside, it's cold outside, there's not a whole lot to do out there. We want to find these people and get them out there to officiate these games. And what we do is we run our people through these courses, we train them on the rules of the game. It's video work, it's floor work, and they're learning about the game of basketball. And then we get them out on the floor, we run them through some scrimmages so they can see what the game is going to look like up front. And a lot of them have commented that it doesn't look so fast when you're up in the stands. And Nate can admit to that. The game's a lot faster than you think, but there's not any one of us that's special enough to say we have a skill set to be an official. We work at it every year. We work at our rules trainings. We work together to become better. We watch basketball games on TV. We watch them live. We watch each other work. And you pick up little things along the way. And we just want to get people involved. If former players who used to play, they're great. We love to have them come in there. They're athletic. They've got lots of energy. We get parents who say, you know, my kids have played and now I want to be involved. And that's what we're looking for. And back when I first started on the board in 2001, we had about 120 officials. And that was covering roughly 32, 33 schools. Now it's 2018, we've got more schools with the inclusion of a lot of charter schools. I think we cover 38 or 39 schools this last year, and we have only 80 officials to do it.
Wow.
So
you lost a third of your officials.
Yeah.
It's a huge hit. Nate, you're the president of the board right now. Got to be frustrating.
It is frustrating because it's very rewarding, and you know, most of our officials look at it as an opportunity to give back. And what we're doing is we're providing a service to the schools and the student athletes, and many of us approach it just that way. It's a chance to get involved. I mean, we get older, our bodies break down, we can't play anymore, but we still want to get involved. And many of our officials just look at it as a way to stay involved. It's also a great way to get out of the house in the winter. It makes the winter go by fast. It's a great way to keep your cardio and your physical conditioning somewhat in check during the winter as well. It's also a byproduct it's a way to kind of earn a little extra money on the side. And that's not the primary motivation for 99% of the officials, but it's an avocation. It's a hobby, and it's something that many of us put a lot of time, effort, and energy into it, and we take pride in what we do, and there's opportunities to advance. It's a slow process to improve as an official, and you know, with this point-and-click society that we live in, this is not point-and-click. I mean, it's a slow process to work your way up, and starting out doing rec league games and working your way up to middle school games, and then junior varsity games, and then subsequently varsity games. And you know, a lot of people take a look at the product on the basketball court with the players, and oh yeah, there happens to be a couple of officials out there, but they didn't start, you know, officiating in packed gyms in front of 700 people. They started, you know, at the YMCA on Saturday mornings with fourth graders in front of 9 parents.
That's right.
You know,
it's so true. And
you just
it's funny because when I was coaching basketball, that's what I did. I did the rec league stuff. That's what I did. Yeah. And you know, we did it because it was fun. We just thought it was cool to help the kids out. It goes back to us being there for the kids, you know? Just like when we were kids at the YMCA running up and down the court, and the older, you know, teenagers were doing that for us, right?
And at the end of the day, Mike referred to, you know, some of our numbers. You know, 15 years ago we had 120 officials servicing, you know, that many schools, and now we're down to 80. And the reality is that we need officials, and we strongly encourage, you know, anyone out there that knows of anyone to contact us at IAABO28.org and get in touch with Mike or myself or anyone in that, you know, the games can't be played without officials. And we sometimes have officials that are working games in the afternoon, and they work games at night because we have to make sure that all these games get covered. And somehow it ends up working its way out, but at the same time, you know, our board is in need of some younger officials. You know, we've lost 40 officials over the last 15 years for a number of different reasons. Guys get older, they retire, they've been doing it for 30 years. It's time for them to step aside and move on and let someone else take their place, except that we don't have anyone coming in behind to help take their place. And that's what we're trying to do is grow our organization, to convince people that it's a great opportunity to learn more about the game. It's an unbelievable association of men and women that have a passion for this hobby, and it's been one of the most rewarding things that I've done in my particular life. I'm going into my somewhere around 12th year, I think it is, and one of the things what you talked about, Mike, about many of the things he does, he's also a mentor to a number of younger officials, and the mentoring that takes place and the relationships that are formed are unbelievable, and these are friends that I'll have for the rest of my life. And
it's true.
It's unbelievable. It's
this
great.
guy right here, I'm telling you, man, he is the cheerleader, and he is the guy who is willing to really promote this board. He has a passion for this. Yep. Jeff and I were saying one day, there's no better than the church when it comes to promoting the officials. And it stunk for us one day when we watched Mr. Haig have to do a double shift. He ended up doing the JV and the varsity game because they didn't have enough officials one day. Mr. Haig's not a young buck. He's an older gentleman. Yeah. Glenn Mallett, still doing it after all these years. Jerry Burgess, still doing it after all these years.
Stevie Kreitz.
Stevie Kreitz is still doing it after those are the guys that were, when we were in school, I graduated in '84, guys. Yep. They were around then, all right? These guys are special dudes, man, and they're still getting it done.
And they still got it.
They do. Yeah. They really do.
They still got it.
Absolutely.
So it really shows that they have made the commitment to this as well, you know? And then you got some guys that are around your age, Nate, with like, you know, B.J. Guerin. You know, you got Jeremy Thomas, and you got Woody, and a few of these other guys that are coming up, and of course Church, and you know, Andy Rogers. I mean, God, what would you do without these guys? If you didn't have this extra group of people that are a little younger, these older guys, they're going to finally get to a point where they just got to say, I got to hang up my sneakers, man. I'd love to do it, but it's getting tough.
And to their credit, I think some of them had hoped years ago to be done by now.
I get it. I do.
But I'm not sure that they're comfortable with our current numbers and moving on with and leaving us hanging. And as much as they enjoy it primarily, I think that they're team players as well, and they're really helping us out.
Well, I have a lot of respect for your board, a lot of respect for your officials, and we've made a big commitment to you guys, and that is every year you run a special all-star game, and it gives the seniors an opportunity from each school in Franklin and Hampshire County to pick a couple of players from each team to come and play in a showcase game where you guys raise money for scholarships for these kids. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, and that actually started years ago, back probably when Nate and I were still playing. It used to be called the Casey Classic Tournament. We did it at the beginning of the year.
Yep.
Usually they did it at Smith Vocational
School. That's correct.
And I had the luxury of playing in a game and getting beat by 70 down there when I played.
Wow.
Many years ago, but. You know, back then they would do it before the season started. They would have the big event, and it kind of transitioned into doing it as more of an all-star game at the end of the year. And for a lot of these kids that didn't make the tournament, this is one more game.
Right.
You know, it's one more chance to be out there in front of their friends. But we saw last year at our event at Smith Academy, there were a couple of kids from Northampton in the game, a couple of kids from Gateway. They had huge contingents of their students came down.
It was great
to cheer these kids on. And it was one last game.
We had a huge turnout for that event this year. Huge turnout. And Jeff and I were there, and we had a wonderful time. And honestly, guys, we talked about this too when you guys were coming on the interview. Remember, this was my first year that I've ever been a part of this one, because Chris Collins has always been able to make it. So it was my first time, and I'm like, man, this is great. So even if I don't end up being one of the announcers for Bear, I'm still coming next year, because that was just fun watching the kids play. And I'll tell you another thing, what was fun too, is they take kids from Franklin and Hampshire counties, and they put them together with people they don't normally play with. That made it fun.
Yeah,
great idea.
And that we used to do it Franklin versus Hampshire County. It was kind of a county pride thing. And when you look at the way that the schools are broken up, a lot of the larger population schools are in Hampshire County, so it's kind of the underdogs up north here. So we mixed the teams together a little bit. Kind of used 91 as a dividing line for East and West, and ends up being a couple of really good competitive games. The games were great this year. You get to see some kids try a couple things they wouldn't try on the basketball court normally, and it also works as a showcase for our younger officials. We can get some younger officials out there and expose them to a higher level of play, so that next year, as they come back and they're working on refining their craft as officials, they can be ready to take the next step up. And the kind of the next man up mentality. We're going to need someone next year and next year and next year after that. But the real purpose of the game is the scholarship fund. And
exactly.
And we've been blessed with good sponsors who've been willing to put ads in our ad books, donations from our officials who want to give back beyond just doing the games. And we've been able to give out quite a few $500 scholarships to these kids who are going on. And we've had the luxury of doing their games for years. Some of them are going on to play in college. Some of them are just going on to continue their life in college. And it's a real worthy cause, and we're just happy to be part of it.
And you do a great job. I mean, the event is really well received. When the fans go, they get a treat. They really do.
And the cool thing that I enjoy about the game is for the players, it's a perfect balance of camaraderie and competition, because as you said, they get to play with people on the same team that they've played against their entire high school career and even before that. And it's kind of all fun and loose, and then invariably every year with about 5 minutes left, everyone kind of takes a peek up at the scoreboard and says, all right, now let's see who's going to win this thing.
That's true.
And then in the last 5 minutes, the players start playing, the refs start reffing, the fans really started to get into it, but it's a nice balance there as well. But again, at the end of the day, it's about the Casey Scholarship, and Mike talked about all the sponsors we get every year for our program, and it's also important to point out that a lot of officials on our board usually donate the equivalent of a game check towards the Casey Scholarship as well.
And that's what I'm going to do for next year. Is I'm going to donate into that book. I'm going to put something in there myself, because I just think that is a great thing that you guys do. And like I was telling Jeff, I think that it's great to be able to let the seniors know that this is a cool way to go out. Like you said, it's an extra game, right? It's fun. And it's funny because when you saw who the coaching staffs were, you had the coach of the girls team from the Franklin County Tech, Sean Knightley, in with Perry Messer, the guy from Northampton. So you got the Division I team, and you got one of the smallest schools, and the two coaches are helping each other out at the Classic this year. That was neat. I like that kind of stuff.
The coaches have their own circle and network. It's a way for them to grow and meet other coaches and learn from them as well.
It's really great. Yeah. It's a great thing that you guys do year after year. And like you said, throwing out a $500 scholarship to be able to say thank you to a kid for being a good student athlete, that's awesome too. Let's talk sportsmanship, guys. I'm going to just sort of slide into that for a minute. What do you guys feel the take is now of sportsmanship by parents? I'm not even going to get into the kids first. I'm going to go parents first, because I believe that the kids feed off of what their parents do. Let's talk with you first, Church. I'm going to let you go at it first. I'm going to go with him second, because we're going to talk a little bit about Nate on what he's been able to do, because Nate does a little more than just high school refereeing, and we'll talk about him on a different level in a moment. But let's get to you first, Church. Parents, sportsmanship. Hit me.
Yeah, as referees, when you're reffing the game, you occasionally will hear something, but for the most part, you're focused on the game. There's a lot of different individual things that go on in a basketball game. The relationship with the players on the floor, the relationship with the coaches, coaching the game, and you tend to block some of that out. After your first couple years of doing it, you've heard it all.
Yes.
And you kind of can block it out. But we do occasionally. You have a gym that gets hot. You have a couple of close plays. Every time we blow our whistle, 50% of the people there aren't going to be happy. And that's the reality of being an official.
That's a guarantee.
And, and sometimes it just happens in the game that 2 or 3 calls go one way. Mm-hmm. And sportsmanship, I would say, over the years, it gets a little more difficult as kids get older. I think the AAU and the specialization kind of feeds into that a little bit. If these kids have been playing one sport and this is their big sport, you tend to get a little more upset about the calls.
But those are the parents that are the biggest complainers.
Yeah,
those are the parents at the games that are the biggest complainers, are the parents whose kid plays the year-round one sport. They're the biggest complainers. And I'll look in the camera and say that to you right here. You're the biggest complainers. And because of the fact that that is all they see. That's all they see, because that's all their kids are doing. They're running to tournaments all year round.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And what I would say to some of those parents is we need officials. Come on out. If you can make the call from the stands, I'm sure you can make it on the court. And we'd be happy to have you out there. But we know that the rules of the game, there's a lot of intricacies within the rules. I've been doing this now, this will be my 18th year. And there is many games where I get in the car after the game, and before I leave the parking lot of the gym, I'm opening my rule book and flipping up a rule just to make sure I either got it right or how I didn't get it right, because I want to know for the next time I go out there. And I'm sure there are many parents out there, many kids out there who are going to see this, who are going to say, hey, that's the guy that blew that call. They may be right, because we're not going to get 100% of the calls right. But we want to, and we know that you're upset. We know that your parents are upset, and your girlfriend is upset, and your best friend who you're going out with pizza for after the game is upset. But we're out there doing the best we can, and we want people to understand that,
you're a human being, dude.
We're not,
and
we're,
you make
we're not in the
too.
NBA.
That's
we're not
right.
in the NBA, and
oh well, they're the biggest offenders, man. I think the referees and the players are the biggest offenders in the NBA.
And
I think
that's a whole nother 30 minutes.
That's another show.
We could do a whole thing on that. Okay,
but they see it on TV.
That's our problem.
They see the person on TV who's getting upset, who's getting the call, and they think, well, if I'm upset, or if the fans get riled up, we'll get the next call. We'll get the next call. The next call will happen within the rules of the game.
Correct.
And no official walks out of there at the end of the game and says, boy, I just feel like I did a terrible job and I'm really upset about it. They feel like, no, I might have made a mistake or two, but I'm going to get better next time. And we know that the fans are upset. One thing that I've been doing softball tournaments all summer long, and one of the greatest compliments we get when we come off the floor is when someone from the losing team says, hey, you guys did a great job.
I agree.
And because the winning team's always going to be happy.
Sure.
But when someone from the losing team says, hey, you did a great job, or the losing coach comes up to you and says, I got to admit, you were right on point. You made those calls. We really appreciate it. And that's what we're there for. We're there to make sure that the game can be played, and we know people are going to get upset, but that's not what we're concerned about. We're concerned about making sure these kids have officials.
Yeah. I also think that a lot of the coaches have done a good job with you guys, doing a lot of basketball games this past winter and the last 3 years that I've done. I'm on the air, so I know what's going on because I'm watching everything that's going on. I think, for the most part, I really think that the coaches have been pretty good. I really do. I really do. I think the relationship between the officials and the coaches has definitely gotten better, and I think the respect factor has gotten better.
It's better than most people think.
I think you're right. I do.
And
I think the same way as you do.
Many officials and coaches and coaches, they have perspective.
Sure.
And they have a job to do and they want to do it, but at the end of the day, we're not solving world peace. We are human. We make mistakes, and it gets back to culture. And what we try and do when we make mistakes is turn them into learning moments, teachable moments for each other. And if more spectators, and parents, and by the way, there are a significant number of parents who are great.
I agree.
And I think it's important that we point that out as well.
The only reason why I was bringing up some of these parents is the fact that I've noticed that the single sport parents seem to be the most uptight.
Yeah. So
that's all.
There are so many teachable moments. Maybe a call didn't go your son or daughter's way. There's an opportunity, how to overcome adversity. How do you overcome a bad break in life? And sports teaches us how to do that. How to overcome a bad call by official. How do you turn that into a positive? And that's the piece, in my opinion, that's missing in terms of growing a culture where life is not perfect. Let's deal with it. Let's move on. Yep. And it's not always, somebody else's fault. Sometimes it is, but deal with it and move on.
Someone said to me one day, they said, Nate Burdick? I said, yes, I do. Nate Burdick is probably one of the best young officials that has made it through this area. I said, I agree with you. And they said, he's been able to move up. Like you said, 12 years. You're now being able to run up and down the court college hoops now.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty big, man. In a short amount of time, this guy has really been able to
absolutely
grow. And Nate, I think what it comes down to is it comes down to three things. I think it comes down to you as a teacher. By you being a teacher in the schools, you know that you have to learn. And I think that the learning process has helped you. Because you know that that's what you're doing. You're teaching the kids. You're hoping that they're going to learn. So you're practicing what you preach and what you're learning as an official. That's number one. Number two, you've always kept yourself in good shape. You've always made sure that you can be able to be under the hoop or be in the right spot to make the right call. That's huge, number two. And number three, and I think the most important thing, is that you really do have a knowledge of the game of basketball, man. You know this game. You've played it since your whole life, ever since you were a little kid running at the YMCA. So you have a lot of knowledge as well. So when you take your learning, you take your athletic ability, and the fact that you can be able to keep the composure that you can keep, you've been able to move up the ladder. So you're a perfect example of somebody who's just a local guy who grew up in Greenfield, Massachusetts, who's been able to now being able to, referee college.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty great for a 12-year vet. I mean, that's awesome.
Thank you, Bobby. That was a lot of nice comments, but let me just add a fourth thing to it.
Okay.
You got to have fun while you're doing it.
Amen, man. And that's really true. I didn't even think about that.
You got to have fun. And you know what? Have things in perspective, put things in perspective, work hard every single night, develop relationship with the coaches, the players, and believe it or not, even the fans.
Yeah.
And it's okay to smile when you're doing it, too.
That's right. And people really respect you guys for the most part. They really do. And I love the thing at the end of the game where each player has to go out and be able to give you guys knuckles at the end of the game. That's all part of the sportsmanship that it needs to be done. And let's get into the kids for a minute. I personally think that the kids and the sportsmanship in our area has been very good. I do not have many complaints. I really don't. And the ones who are pulling the junk on the court, most of the coaches are aware of it, and they're out. It's been great. I have been very blessed to do a lot of great high school games and watch these kids, but I also think we have some really good kids. What do you guys think?
No, absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same as anywhere else. You have a large percentage, 99% of the kids that are great. But again, as an official, part of our job is to maintain and contribute towards a sportsmanship atmosphere out there on the field or on the court. And if there is an issue, we'll try our best to work with the players first, give them a chance to fix it themselves. And if not, then we'll start to communicate with the coaches concurrently as well. And if for some reason the message just isn't getting through, then we have tools and we have to not be afraid to use them because, again, it's going to be hopefully teachable moments for everyone. But that's where the relationship with the players and the coaches comes in, is to try and recognize it early on and head it off at the pass before something brews.
Yeah. Guys, in a nutshell, the board needs officials.
Yep.
Church, give us some information on how they can find you or find the website. Go ahead.
All right. Well, we have a website, which is IAABO28.org, and that is the link for our board. There's a contact us link right on there. They can look through, see some of the pictures of some of our officials are up on the board, some of our basic information, and then also a contact link that'll come to me. There's also a list of our officers, so they can look at the list, and there may be a name on there they recognize from somewhere, and they can always reach out to one of them as well. They also can send an email. It's IAABO28@gmail.com, which is just IAABO and then our board number 28@gmail. That will come right to me. Our classes start up in September, so we're trying to build the class now. Usually we'll have a couple announcements that'll come out in August, and then end of September we'll start the classes in Amherst. And it's a two-part process. We do the written part first, the actual rules, the meat of the rules, and then when that's over, and we'll have an exam. Those that go past the rules exam, then we go on to the floor and we actually work on the mechanics of being an official, take a second test, and then it's away we go. We work with our assigner to get everyone on the schedule and getting them games, but they contact me if you're interested, and we definitely want to get people out there. We need to make sure that the kids have officials, and that's how we're going to have to do it, is getting out there and recruiting.
And the class is one night per week.
Yeah.
Okay.
One night per week. So it's just one night. It's about two and a half
hours, depending on the session.
It's after work, and it's centrally located in Amherst so that we can serve the needs of everyone in Franklin and Hampshire County, and educational, and it's the beginning of the process.
Yeah. Right. And college students, you've got your afternoon classes and you're free in the evening. Those who are free in the afternoon sometimes, we've got lots of middle school games and early JV games. So college students, former teachers, former players, reach out to us because we're looking for you.
All right. Well, listen, this was an awesome show here today, and I got to say, I'm so glad that you two made it. I really am. I'm glad that you reached out to me, Church. It was really great to be able to have you both here. On behalf of Michael Churchill and Nate Burdick and the board, I could say nothing but wonderful praise about you guys and your organization and their true passion for the children and the game of basketball.
Thanks, Bobby. We appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for having
So
me.
there you go. Franklin County Varsity Sports Report wraps up for another week. Want to thank our sponsors one more time. Also, my fabulous producer, Philippe Simone. All right. The Fort Leaf Clover Restaurant in Berniston. Also by Denny's Pantry, Berniston Road in Greenfield. Albert Hearing Services, 33 Waddell Street in Greenfield. And by Hubie's, the Tavern and Restaurant on Avenue A in Turners Falls. Until we meet again, have a great week, everyone.
Now, where did I put that ball?